Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for Boston Public Library President David Leonard's 5th annual State of the Library Address. It's wonderful to see so many friends, patrons, and supporters gathered here in Rab Hall, and a big thank you and welcome to those of you who are joining online. My name is Amy McCarthy, and I am a board member of the Boston Public Library Fund. As many of you know, the Boston Public Library Fund is the primary philanthropic arm of the BPL, and the fund's staff works closely with the library to ensure every program, service, branch, workshop, and activity has the support it needs to be successful. Many of you in the audience today are donors to the fund, and I want to take this opportunity to thank you for believing in the power of the Boston Public Library to truly transform lives. We are so grateful for your support. The Boston Public Library holds such a special place in the heart of our city as a space where knowledge, culture, and community come together. When I was in preschool, my mother used to take me to the West End branch of the BPL over on Cambridge Street for story time and to borrow books for the week. Then, as a young teenager, I realized that if I got off the T one stop early on my way home, I could go to the central branch right here and get any book I wanted to, with only a slightly longer walk home. When I moved back into the city with my children almost 15 years ago, one of my first stops with them was to get their library cards here. I was struck by the increased programming and opportunities offered, particularly the Kirstein Business Library and Innovation Center just outside the doors here. This was before the gorgeous renovation of the Boylston building. Under David's leadership, the vitality and energy are palpable. Concerts in the courtyard, creative catalyst mini grants for the branches. Revolution, 250 years of art and activism in Boston, is the first major exhibition in almost a decade, featuring over 100 items from the library's special collections. Please plan to come and see it. It's open through the end of April. The list goes on, and in just a moment, you'll hear from David himself about how the library is keeping its founding promise, free to all. But first, a few quick housekeeping notes. This event is being recorded. David will take your questions. For those of you here in Rab Hall, simply raise your hand and we will bring a microphone to you. If you are at home, type your question in the Q&A feature, which you can access by clicking on the button at the bottom of your screen. So now it's my honor to introduce you to BPL President David Leonard. David has served as president for almost a decade, since 2016, and in his tenure, he has transformed the Central Library and our 25 neighborhood branches into true 21st century institutions. An immigrant from Dublin who has called Boston home for decades, he has made the BPL a national voice for the freedom to read. In the face of rising censorship, he has written about the essential role of public libraries and ensured the BPL was one of the founding members of the Books Unbanned initiative, which extends access to our collections to young people across the country. Excuse me. Under his leadership during the pandemic, the library adapted quickly to community needs. One example is the distribution of 78,000 COVID tests here at Central and at the branches. Most recently, he helped secure a $500,000 Carnegie Corporation grant to expand workforce support for English language learners, deepening the BPL's role as a trusted resource for immigrants across our diverse city. And he has much more to tell you about today. So please join me in welcoming David Leonard, President of the Boston Public Library.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's good to be with you again. Yes, this is our 5th annual address. This began as a way to brief members of the BPL Funds family, extended family, around the priorities and work going on at the library. Amy, thank you for that introduction. Although you made it sound like I'm doing all the work, it is our 540 team members today who make all of that happen, and it is my privilege and honor to lead the team doing all of this great work. I was happy to see that this year our school superintendent decided with the mayor that there would be a state of the schools as well. So I assume flattery is a compliment in some ways. But let us talk about the Boston Public Library. So let's start with some numbers. Let's set some basis for where we are. I'm going to give you quick highlights of our accomplishments over the last year. They don't tell the whole story. Quantitative information is only ever part of a story, and we know something about stories here at the Boston Public Library. And we've indicated that several of these categories where we measure our activity through the number of people we are reaching are actually increasing. That may not be a surprise to many of you who are frequent users of the library, but for example, our visits to all of our locations, our central library here as well as our 25 branches when we're all open, up 30% over last year. That's 3.2 million in-person visits system-wide. Certainly if you're ever here on a Saturday or Sunday and you're not in the door by 9 or 10 a.m., you will have difficulty finding a seat. That's true of some of our busier branches as well. Our circulation, yes, we are still about books, whether they are consumed in print or digitally, up 8% over last year, and our total is 7.5 million items borrowed from the Boston Public Library. That tells you something about the state of our work and people's interest in accessing information, whether for pleasure or to become more informed. Last year, we also had 130,000 new library card renovations, just like Amy's story of her own family as well. We tried a new experiment, though. We branded a particular card after the musician Lefe, and that resulted in 3,800 new card holders. A little tabling going on at TD Garden might have had something to do with that, but it's a really interesting way to engage with users that we might not otherwise be in touch with. Computer sessions still very, very strong, and I'll talk a little bit about special collections through not just our revolutionary art exhibition on a future slide here, but also our digital presence and some very interesting things going on there. So the state of the library is strong, but it is not without challenges, and it is not about deep resource needs, so we'll want to get into that as well. Who makes this come alive? If fully staffed, our full-time positions are at 540. We have about 40 vacancies right now, so we're just about the 500 mark. And of course, there are volunteers, there are part-time employees, there are partner organizations, including the Fund and GBH and others, who make this place come alive, as well as other parts of our work. I do want to spend a moment talking about the context in which we operate. It has been a very difficult year. This is no surprise to people, but I do want to outline some of the major challenges. The federal policy and funding changes nationwide have had an impact on libraries everywhere. Less to BPL from an operating budget point of view, as we are not dependent on federal funding directly. However, we did lose several grants earlier in 2025. We had to close our relationship with Mass Edco that assists students with financial aid applications. That is a service that they were no longer funded to provide, and they have been at the Central Library for decades. So these changes at the federal level really affect our work and people's lives. We've continued to see the politicization of libraries and reading and who controls access to content nationwide. Massachusetts continues to see one of the largest sets of challenges of any of the states or territories in the nation. The good news, however, is the Senate in Massachusetts just passed the Freedom to Read bill, and we are looking forward to seeing that become law, which will protect not only individuals' right to read and to access information, but also protects the workers who are also under threat with these challenges. We must acknowledge that our societies are experiencing social fragmentation, whether this is through the lack of access to economic resources or just lack of opportunities for greater inclusion. The library, being one of the few remaining free gathering places, has a role to play here. And a little insider baseball, but we saw also the collapse of one of the major suppliers of print materials and digital materials to libraries. Baker & Taylor closed business several weeks ago, and so that is going to have an impact on our ability to quickly deliver the latest print works to our residents. We are diversifying. There are other suppliers who will replace them, but it takes time to bring them online. So we are not immune to what is happening in the commercial space also. And of course, artificial intelligence. Is it an opportunity or is it a threat, or probably both? We have an opportunity to lead in this space through an exploratory partnership with the firm OpenAI, where we are using some of their tools to test out whether we can bring more collections that are offline and not accessible to the general public. Can we bring them online faster and allow our staff to focus on quality control and the finishing work? We don't want to take humans out of the equation. We don't believe that's the right thing to do, but it is a tool that we can see if we can use successfully. So we're in a funded pilot to test that out. Do we have enough quality control? Will we see good results? Or do we have more hallucination to deal with? So we don't want that happening in the Boston Public Library. Just continuing this theme and taking some notes from our strategic plan, which I will talk about as well, just to situate the great work that we've done. Not only are these strong numbers for 2025, which is not even complete yet, that tell the work that we are doing. We have the third largest set of collections in the country for libraries. We serve not just the city of Boston with its 700,000 residents, but also we serve as the library for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, which gives us a reach of about 7 million people. We do that, of course, in partnership with the Mass Library Association and the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners and others throughout the state. But anyone who lives, works, or goes to school in Massachusetts is entitled to a full-service Boston Public Library card. Now, the challenge, however, and this was work done during our strategic planning work last year, that work comparing us to our peers demonstrates that we operate and have these accomplishments with 25%, sometimes as high as 78% fewer staff than other organizations of our size, and substantially less funding than the leading other public libraries in the country. So you get a good deal. But equally, that puts a burden on our staff to do more with less. And I think we continue to be dedicated to serving our constituents as best we can. But this is the role that philanthropy, donors, and supporters can play in leveling the playing field a little better. Imagine what would be possible if the investment matched the size of our ambition. And so let's talk about a few of the wins of last year. One that we love, it was the arrival of the LEGO Group's headquarters to the top of Newbury Street here in Boylston Street. And they, top of Newbury Street actually, they basically decided that the Boston Public Library would be one of several cultural institutions which they would invest in because of our commitment to young people, because of our commitment to learning through play. And so we have a $1 million grant over the next 2 years that is bringing new programs and new capacity to life, again, delivering on the literacy values and goals of the organization. A second grant that I want to point out is that which Amy referenced in her opening introduction. The Carnegie Corporation, one of the longest serving funders of public libraries in the United States. Of course, our founding goes back earlier than Andrew Carnegie's work, but they had turned their attention to global matters over the last several years, and we were thrilled to realize that this year they were turning back to serve public libraries in the US, and we were one of a very, very competitive group, I think of about 16 finalists who were then granted a $500,000 grant in our case. That work goes directly to support English language learning and employment support for residents. This is the most in-demand area of our newer modern services. We have waiting lists, and we are one of the few free providers of this service in the city. Summer reading, summer learning remains one of our key youth program areas offered at many of our branches, if not all. This year, over 6,000 children, and we extended it to adults as well, engaged in summer reading programs. This work was supported by about 500 donors who raised $177,000 to support that work. So I do want to turn for the next few slides to situate our work over the last year in the context of our strategic plan. We completed this. It was voted by our Board of Trustees in December of 2024. And for this last year, it's been a little bit like trying on a new suit. We are getting used to this language and these focus areas. But unlike many other strategic plans, the differentiating fact here was that it called out 4 roles that we play in community. That of being a welcoming destination, which is about our spaces, our 25 branches and our central library. It is about being a lifelong learning and research partner. That's probably where you would locate many of the traditional and modern services offered by a public library. But we're also a community engager. I'm talking to one of our guests here about a weekly group that meets in Newsfeed Cafe. There are many ways in which our community rooms and our spaces are community engaging spaces, either for groups or for individuals. But equally in these times, to be a trusted resource, a place where you can go get the information you need, get connected to resources that you can. This is everything from exploring history and looking at our roots as a nation, through to how do I get connected to our social work services or to housing providers or other institutions that work with people in need. So let's start with welcoming destination and give you a few highlights from each of these 4 roles. I don't have time today really to talk about the entirety of the portfolio of work, but we've prepared some highlights in each of these 4 roles to talk about. So welcoming destination, this is about our spaces. And the most tangible way in which this comes to life is through the City of Boston's commitment to our capital, through capital projects, to renovate our branches. We are well on the way to, in the last decade and the decade ahead, having renovated 50% of our branch portfolio. Today, Fields Corner, which you see in the bottom right picture here, is well into construction to bring about a new 2-story branch building at that location on the same site as the original library. Eggleston Square and South End are both in late-stage design, waiting for authorization to proceed into bidding and construction. Both of those will be new builds on the existing site. And then we have the 3 amazing new stories, innovative ways to deliver not just a new library building to the community, but to do so under the housing with public assets. So in each of these locations, the plan will be a branch library on the 1st, 2nd floor with housing above it. Either affordable housing, affordable to rent, affordable to own. In each case, there's a slightly different model led by each of those developers. So that is our portfolio of work in the branch space that we expect to be bringing online over the next few years. And yes, there are a couple of branches waiting in the wings to go next after these. But I want to turn to the Central Library because it is always about balance in our world. Are we balancing our focus on branches with our focus on the Central Library? Are we balancing our focus on the everyday user with perhaps the special collections or research needs of certain users, although everybody can be a researcher? The McKim building, as you know, built in 1895, much of it was renovated in the early 90s and early 2000s, but they never got to the third floor. This is as grand a space as Bates Hall, as the Guastavino Room, as the Abbey Room. And given what we said about user visits earlier, we need the space back online. And so we, through an anonymous foundation grant, have 3 years of work ahead to prepare for a major renovation of the Central Library's McKim building. Not just the third floor, but looking at the other spaces that need additional attention because they have aged a bit or were never touched during the earlier years. We have engaged a consulting firm called Pam is Here to work with us on the vision for services that will happen in these renovated spaces. Because we have learned that for something this complicated and so important and so beloved, it's important to know what we are going to do as much as how we're going to renovate the building. And so this work over the coming year is focused on what experience do we want you as visitors to have? What role does access to our collections play in activating the spaces? What are the purpose of the spaces for the public and for staff in this world? What are the types of services that a modern public library should offer in a historic building? So that work we'll be talking about over the next several months, and I'd be really happy to get back to you with an update later next year. We are calling the overall arc of preparing for this renovation our bridge to McKim. The strategic services plan that I just talked about is the starting point. We are bringing on an architectural project management firm to do additional analysis of the building, because the work that we did in 2021, for those of you who will remember, really provided us a conceptual master plan, just at the highest level what would be possible. Now we have to do the deeper work of looking at the building's environmental systems, electrical systems, the historic obligations we have. There are spots that have either had mold over the years or had leaks over the years. And so that is a really complex piece of work. That will all together converge in a new master plan, and in parallel at the bottom, and this is where our Boston Public Library Fund colleagues come in, getting ready to raise the funds to support all of this work, whether we do it in one phase or multiple phases. This will be the most complex project that the library has done. We did cut our teeth on the beautiful Boylston Street renovation. Hard to believe that that is 10 years ago now. So we believe we're ready for this work. Our building, our system, our public deserves it. And if you want to learn more about that, I'm going to point you to the recent Boston Globe article, which talked about the Library of Treasures that are off limits to the public. Some homework. It's a learning institution, so you get homework, sorry. Turning to our second role of the four within the strategic plan, I want to turn now and talk a little bit about some examples in the lifelong learning and research partner space. So here, social work has become an important part of offerings and services to our patrons, many patrons in need, or advocates working with someone who has specific needs. Our English as a second language, or ESOL, other languages, again, one of our most in-demand services being now supported by the Carnegie Grant. We've also had residencies. We have an entrepreneur in residence in the Kirstein Business Library. We have a chef in residence at the Roxbury branch in our nutrition lab. And we are this year adding a children's musician in residence, a new exciting program there. Also funded by the Lego Group, will be our launch of a new program for families with newborns, which we are calling Hello Hatchlings. So they will get a kit that will prepare them for reading later in life and for some resources that new parents may need from their library. I also want to point out some of our signature program successes under this banner. We had Academy Award-winning artist Ruth Carter. She was the costume designer in Black Panther. Here, we had the Drucker Award lecture this year being given to Ken Folk. And lest you think this is all about the Central Library, it is not. We have just funded for the third year in a row through donations from the Boston Public Library Fund support for 41 individual programs this coming year across all 25 branches. But I will go back to the Central Library. Amy also referenced revolutionary art. This is the most significant exhibition the Boston Public Library has done in modern times. It is our way, during this year of revolutionary art, getting ready for our 250th anniversary next year, that of the nation. And rather than tell a story that is only about a moment in time or moments in time about 249 years ago, we have chosen to tell a story through pieces of art from our collection that take you on the journey across those 250 years. So you will see, yes, you will begin with Ben Franklin and George Washington, but you will also encounter those who worked on women's suffrage. You will encounter stories of Haiti's role in the early abolitionist movement. You will encounter Martin Luther King Jr. and his tie to Boston. You will encounter Malcolm X. You will encounter the gay rights movement. You will encounter art about transgender individuals whose lives were lost in the struggle for justice. So it will take you through this as a journey of civil rights, all through different artwork. This exhibition runs through April 21st in the McKim Exhibition Hall on the first floor as you come in on the Copley Square side. And if you want more homework, there's a Globe article, there's a Chronicle recording, and so we're really, really pleased with the coverage, all brought to life by now an incredible curatorial staff in special collections. And that work, the exhibition, funded through a grant through the Boston Public Library Fund, the staff, of course, funded in many cases through the Associates of the Boston Public Library. Moving to role number 3, community engager. I want to highlight 2 things here. I'm not going to go through everything. One is the topic of civic engagement. This is a role that libraries play. Sometimes it's about being a polling place or about organizing informational topics, but maybe it's about more than that. Maybe it's about the type of society we want to build and live in. So during the course of this next year, our staff, in partnership with colleagues from Simmons University and Brown University, will be working on what is the library's role in civic engagement more formally. We also relaunched our wonderful Passport program this year, thanks to our communications team and leadership. So this is where you get your little book, and you travel to all of the branches, and you get a stamp at each one, and then there are prizes for completing the whole set. Maybe it's our version of Pokemon, but we called it the Passport program. So, trusted resource. The role of intellectual freedom was something we decided was very important this year, and put our staff through a whole series of training, a refresher in most cases on what is intellectual freedom, how do we ensure that everybody's rights are in fact protected in their choice of what they want to read. We also have formed a couple of interest groups based upon our strategic plan principles that will take us forward. Our Books Unbanned program was our way of bringing access to our collections beyond Boston, Massachusetts, to anyone who all they had to do was write a statement, be between the ages of 13 and 26, of what they could no longer get access to in their locality. We have now had over 17,000 registrations from all 50 states, including Puerto Rico and Guam and American Samoa. This is the Boston Public Library providing resources to ensure the principles of open access in our society and intellectual freedom are preserved. I've referenced the artificial intelligence project, not just in partnership with OpenAI, but also with Harvard Law School. Their digital lab is assisting us, in addition to our own digital team, with the scanning and metadata work to understand what the opportunity is here. But we do know, we also have to be aware that technology like AI comes at a cost, and understand more deeply if that cost is worth it, whether it's the energy costs or perhaps in some cases, not ours, but in others, it may be sacrificing jobs. In other cases, it may be sacrificing critical thinking or even access to trusted information itself. Organizational readiness is kind of our fifth role. It's the internal one that you don't see necessarily. And this is about staff readiness. It is also about funding capacity. We have done a few things for our staff. One, we have a new Simmons Fellowship Program for both individuals at the library or individuals who wish to pursue a library degree initially. It may apply to other degrees in the future, but today it's focused on a library degree for obvious reasons. And so this fellowship will cover the costs of tuition, as well as ensure that the individual has a part-time and then full-time position here at BPL during their tenure. The second thing we've done is rebooted our Brown Bag Lunch series, very internal, but good community building opportunity, as well as information sharing. Not all training has to be formal. Sometimes it's about sharing your experience and your knowledge with colleagues. Project management tools, that should be a no-brainer for people, but we're investing in that area too. This is a very complex organization, and the more we adopt formal project management methodology, the stronger we will be from conception to execution of new initiatives, as well as evaluating them. And then lastly, to adopt, given the fact that we're seeing so many patrons with challenges of their own, sometimes social, sometimes behavioral, sometimes personal, we want to take a more trauma-informed approach to our work with patrons, because we know the sheer numbers are increasing the stress on our staff to work with individuals. We want to do this work, we are called to do this work, but we have to take care of our staff as well. To the funding. So I'm painting a very good story. The numbers bear this out. These initiatives are amazing. This is what people want us to be doing, but it does come at a cost, and we are not funded at the level that we believe we should to do all of this at scale. And so really there are four categories. The City of Boston, which has both an operating budget and capital budget that supports us. We live as part of the Human Services Cabinet within the City of Boston today. We're headed into Mayor Wu's second term and look forward to, there are challenging times ahead for those of you who have read the Globe articles this morning, but we continue to be thankful for a mayor who understands the value of libraries, for our Chief of Human Services, Jose Masso, who may be here or are joining us online. Secondly, we are supported by the state at a much lower level. That is for our Library for the Commonwealth program. Our ebooks and digital services are the two most well-known services available statewide. We also rely on our internal trust funds and our enterprise revenue from rental opportunities. Those funds are managed by the trustees of the Boston Public Library. And then fourthly, which is why many of you are here or joining us because of your interest in supporting us through the Boston Public Library Fund. And I do want to acknowledge that while they are the primary philanthropic partner, we also receive funds either locally at friends groups or for special collections through the associates. And one of the most fun things, before I start to wrap up and take questions, the fund has an amazing staff they've put on today. There are credible programs. We've highlighted several of the grants that came in. But one very special moment occurred October 31st. For a few years, for the last 3 years in particular, the Young Professionals Group, the Emerging Leaders Group, as it's officially known, put on a night in the stacks. This year, they knocked it out of the park. I don't mean just Copley Park. This fourth year was nightmare in the stacks because it fell on Halloween. They had 900 guests, filled the McKim building, and raised over $380,000 in support of programs, services, and collections. So it is with deep gratitude that, yes, I can support and celebrate the work of the library, but it is programs like this and support like these that ensure that that can actually happen. So what is our ask for you? This is really the test. Which of these buckets do you believe you fall into? All of them? One of them? Two of them? Please be ambassadors for our work and for our need. Be advocates for the role of the public library in society, whether it's Boston or another town or environment. This is literally about funding the future. So we have existed for 177 years. Our charter was 1848. Now I've lost my ability to do math, but we've been around a while. But this is about the future of our society. This is about the future of learning. This is about the future of education. This is about the future of the arts and culture sector and human services and civic engagement. Be a partner with us. We are only as good as the feedback that we get. Sometimes that is positive. We're not perfect. We know that. We can be better, and we will be better with your feedback. The role of elected officials is really, really important. 80% of our budget, our operating budget, comes from the City of Boston, about another 10% from our elected officials statewide. You are the people who interact with those elected officials and have the ability to advocate on our behalf. And please, stay engaged, attend events like this, visit the branches. If you have a good experience with our staff, say thank you. It matters. And so let me end with this particular slide, because during our strategic plan, we did a mission statement, yes, we did a vision statement, we have these 4 roles that we've talked about. But when it came to what is our actual value, we ultimately came back to that very phrase inscribed on the front of the McKim building, right over the door. It is not just our motto, but it has become emblematic of the role of public libraries everywhere. And then we riffed on it, because our mission has broadened. And so, it is not just free to all, where free and all are both important. It is about being free to discover, free to learn, free to explore, free to imagine, free to connect, free to create, free to read, free to think, free to choose, free to be. That is the Boston Public Library. Thank you. And so now we have time for some questions and maybe some answers, or I'll get back to you later if necessary. We are going to try and take a couple of questions from both in the hall as well as online. Both Paula and Katie have microphones, so if you want to ask a question, and please don't be shy. I know several of you well, so I know you're not going to hold back if you have something burning. Please raise your hands, and we'll take the microphone to you in order.
Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you. That was a great presentation. I'm a library enthusiast for the last 4+ decades. There was something that I thought should be added to that great slide that you had about the 6 ways in which we can be interacting with the library, and that is to support and center the work of the staff, particularly the librarians, because this probably could be a really great organization, even if it's just like providing books willy-nilly, here, just take what you want, but it's the impact of the librarians and their dedication to their job and to the city and to the patrons that really make this experience more special than the libraries in New York City are just terrible by comparison, I promise you. So, you know, I hope that we continue to see the support of these great professionals.
Thank you so much. Like, we're not competitive with New York at all, so I agree with you. We have amazing collections, we have amazing buildings, we do amazing services. None of that happens without trained, qualified, supported library workers, those with official library degrees, and everybody else as well who makes it come to life. This is an area where our strategic plan very specifically called out much more work to do. And so while we're only in year 1, I hope when I'm standing here in year 3, year 4, year 5, the story of support for staff actually gets better. So thank you for making that the first question. We have 2 down front. And I have the lights right in my eyes, so I may not see everybody. We'll take these 2 down front and then see what's next.
Hi, David. Thank you. That was an excellent presentation, as always. But I'm curious, you mentioned there was a books provider or something, that they went out of business.
Yeah.
What was the story on that?
So Baker and Taylor was the name of the company. So they would buy from publishers. They sell to libraries. Libraries were their exclusive market. And they basically were very strong at having essentially discounted pricing for libraries, and their financial picture just didn't work out, and they shut their doors, unfortunately, with almost no notice, laid off hundreds of staff, including some from the New England area, and we actually had word that they were going to be acquired by another firm and that the future would be okay, and then that just disappeared in a moment. So, you know, we showed statistics of 7 million items lent. And so we're now moving to one of the other providers. Amazon for years has been, had restrictions on what they will or won't sell to libraries. So this is really behind the scenes kind of work that you would never see. We can't just go to Barnes and Noble or pick your favorite independent bookseller. And have the books on hand for you. So it's a big hit to the library. It means that the processing time will be longer, the costs will probably be higher, and our budget is not going up in our collections area, which means we will be buying fewer books as a result of this impact.
Politically motivated?
No, just the finances didn't work. I'm not privy to their internal revenue versus expense picture, but it's a going out of business situation. Now there are good other vendors, but it'll take us time to ramp up, and the costs will be higher. Thank you. There was one question. Yeah.
Hi, David. I think libraries. I think this was a great presentation. I'm a big fan of the library. We come here every week. I think libraries represent the best of democracy in a lot of ways. And it looks like there's some really great planning processes that you all are undertaking. My questions are around like residents and library card holders.
Yeah.
Curious to hear, compared to the demographics of Boston, who's attending the library and who's missing from the library, who's not participating in the system. And as you are embarking on some of these planning processes, what roles do residents play in a decision-making capacity? And what's preventing that from happening now as you're thinking about programs and designing things, especially this Catalyst program, which sounds like it could be really great to have residents play a decision-making role in what the programs are?
Good. So that's basically two questions. That's okay. The first question being about who uses the library. And the stats slide talks about new library card users. We, as a philosophical principle, collect only the most minimal information about anyone when they're signing up for a library card. We really only want your name, address, and a way to contact you. The beauty of that is that we're never going to have more information about you than you are willing to give us or that we need. The downside is we may not know all about you that would tell us more about how to serve you better. We are considering, on an opt-in basis, inviting people to share more if they are comfortable, so that we could customize some offerings to you. I'm not sure how that's going to work. I'm not sure if that will be a bridge too far. I think in these times where many big companies are amassing large amounts of personal information about people, there's reluctance to do that. Equally, I think our younger generations are just more comfortable giving over, whether they should be or not, information about themselves and their lives at a moment's notice. We all read those terms and conditions on everything that's on our phone and our computers, right? So I think there's complexity to the security and confidentiality of personally identifying information. On a demographic basis, with a zip code, we can tell a little bit about who's using. And we know from looking at the different branches, some branches will score very highly on their book borrowing. Others will score very highly on the use of the space, the foot traffic to the space. Others will have a variety of attendance levels at different types of programs. Sometimes the quantitative data about all of that only tells you so much, and we never want to only make decisions based on quantitative data because we care about the individual journey of a patron, whether it's a young reader or someone who's in need of specific services or help. So it's a very complicated set of things to balance here. I would like us to be able to tell who we're leaving out. So during the upcoming visioning process for the renovation of the McKim building, we anticipate going back to the community at large to get some input. At this stage, we're focused on staff ideas, and it's a very internal part of the process, but a later phase will have moments for engagement. So I do think on specific projects, we make invitations and outreach. Any of the branch renovation projects, which I highlighted earlier, all of those have deep community process. And there's usually at least 4 big meetings, and at least one, if not 2, will be really painful, and the other 2 will be somewhat joyful. That's part of the nature of the process, having done several of these. So people in Boston are not shy about telling you what they like or don't like. We know this. I will say that there is a new desire in public libraries more generally when it comes to programming, that we do co-development of programming. We haven't really tested that out here yet, but I'm looking forward to finding under that community engagement role a way to test out where that works well. We've actually had requests from a couple of communities, specifically our friends groups. And so what sometimes happens is Friends Group puts on a program with the branch librarian supporting, branch librarian puts on a program, sometimes with the Friends Group supporting. I think there's a possibility of going to one more level about doing joint or co-programming. But sometimes these are easy to sit here and say, more difficult to do in practice. But thank you for that input. I think I covered both questions. Okay, great. Do we take an online question?
Is this working? Yes. I have 2 online questions. We'll do 2 rapid fire and then a longer one, David.
Oh, rapid fire.
Yes. Okay, ready? Let's see. What was the favorite branch you visited this year? I know. Maybe that's
you can't
long.
ask me that.
Do you have one? No.
I will answer the question this way. I have the newer branches that we have renovated, and there are certainly 8 that have had full renovations. Each one brings something special online. They're all different. This has always been true of Boston Public Library. Each branch is different, each community is different, each staff is different, and that's part of the joy of the uniqueness here, that yes, we are one system, there is individuality at each level. The temporary 1,500 square foot branch in Chinatown that we brought online now I think 7 years ago, 6-7 years ago, the turnout for the ribbon cutting there was absolutely incredible. Why? Well, you know, that neighborhood hasn't had a dedicated branch since 1956, so the fact that that was finally being remedied, that was a special moment. But visiting last year, you know, I think what we have done at the Roxbury branch is incredibly special. It's a you know, larger building. It has a tougher mandate in some ways because of the complexities of challenges for that neighborhood. You know, but to have it so warm and welcoming, you know, it's an architectural improvement, and Michael Colford, who's here, Director of Library Services, has reminded us on several occasions that when we do a good job of transforming a physical space, it makes the transformation and updating and modernization of services so much easier. So, you know, but the question is really about trying to ask me to choose my favorite child, so I'm not going to do more than that.
All right, this is a quick one. In this fiscal climate, if a local town library is decertified, can a resident of the town borrow material from the BPL?
Yes, they can. And there's some challenges around how to do that, but yeah, so that relates to the Mass Board of Library Commissioners certification of individual libraries. They may no longer be available for state funding if they become decertified based upon the set criteria, but it is free to all here. So we're not going to ask someone, I'm sorry, has your town library been decertified or not? If you live, work, or go to school in Massachusetts, you are able to have a full-service Boston Public Library card. That doesn't change based upon local challenges.
That's right. Okay, and then a little bit of a longer question, and then we'll get back to the audience. There's an increase in both in-person visits and circulation with the news out of the city today about department budgets being cut. I believe I read 2%. How do you see the library addressing that 2% cut?
So let me clarify the article. From what we know right now, is that each city department has been asked to build a plan based upon a 2% cut. That doesn't mean that we will be cut 2%. It doesn't mean that every department will be cut 2%. It could be more. It could be less. The average might still be there. So at this point, we are in a planning exercise, and we are planning for that as our baseline. Our budget is about $60 million all in, with about 40 something coming from the city. We did the calculation last night. That's about $1 million deficit at a flat 2% cut rate. We will go through the exercises of looking at our budgets. We will be advocating for the library to be held as harmless as possible in whatever is coming. It is good fiscal discipline and responsibility to do the plannings and exercises now. The city's budget planning for next year is FY27, by the way, so that's next budget year starts July 1. So we have time, and residents and citizens will have the ability to advocate for different services and departments. We also know that in harsh economic times, the library is called on to do more, and people rely on libraries more. So I look forward to having the opportunity to make those arguments, but in a fiscal crisis, should that actually transpire, everybody tightens their belts.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that presentation. I am affiliated with Trinity Church, the Museum of Fine Arts, the library. So I'm thinking about how does this space create a nexus, a network? Is it beneficial to think about that for the library, say, or not? And have you thought about it and said, that's really a bad idea?
We love partnerships. We partner with the MFA. We have, for example, items on loan, I think, to the Gardner and Athenaeum for the Crite exhibition that's going on. So, again, I like to think of the library sitting at the intersection of three sectors: arts and culture, education, and you can either call it human services or civic engagement. I think those are part of a spectrum. In each of those areas, there are really strong organizations, and we have different partnerships with different levels. Sometimes it's a simple transactional relationship partnership where, yeah, I just want to use your space, and that will be great, and we'll lend our name to each other. In other cases, it's much more strategic. Our long-term relationship with Pine Street Inn, for example, allows us to enhance our social work and outreach to the homeless and housing insecure population. As a member of the Human Services Cabinet within the City of Boston, that brings us in direct partnership with the Boston Center for Youth and Families, Veterans Affairs, Age Strong Commission, the Office of Returning Citizens, the Office of Youth Services. So those are the nexus, if you will, of those collaborations. In each case, there is always more to do, and I don't want to be naive about it. Good partnerships require work and prioritization and capacity to execute well. But if you have specific ideas, I think we'd love to hear them. We're always interested in at least floating the ideas and understanding what the possibilities are. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it works out 2 years later than when you thought it would. So, but none of this we do alone. We are here as a community resource. One final?
This is our last question.
Okay. Oops.
Yep.
Okay. I can stay.
Hi. Reading levels in America are among the lowest in the developed world.
Yeah.
I'm sure you learned to read through phonetics, and then reading by pictures became the way kids were taught. What are you doing to overcome the horror of social media for kids and reading the wrong way?
Yeah.
We need to get back to phonetics.
We have some very skilled early literacy librarians on our staff who are have much more expertise in the best ways to learn to read. I do think it's not a case of one size fits all, and BPL has always advertised itself as more of a choose your own adventure pathway. From my point of view, How people come to reading is less important than that they are reading. A couple of quick examples. We partner with the Boston Public Schools on their summer reading list. We have our own summer reading programs, again supported by the fund. We have amazing children's, teen, youth librarians both here at Central and across all of our branch system who are working with young people every day to meet them where their needs are. This early literacy program of Hello Hatchlings can start early enough so that by the time people are reading on their own, there's a practice of understanding that books are important. Sometimes it's okay to read digitally. Sometimes you want to actually hold the physical book in your hand. Sometimes a comic or a graphic novel is the right entry point for certain ways of approaching reading. So I do agree with your basic premise that literacy, if democracy is going to have a shot, it requires a higher success rate in education, and education starts with reading. And if we're not getting the third grade reading levels attainments right, then we're going to be behind for the rest of our lives. So this is an area where it takes a village. And final question?
I enjoyed the presentation. How has the rise in book banning affected the collections and the acquisitions at the BPL?
No book has been banned from the Boston Public Library. We do get challenges. We do examine them, and we do reply to people. You might think that once in a blue moon, something's just not shelved in the best place for it. So that can happen. So we do take the input seriously, but we are not changing our acquisition strategy or policy. We are not reducing our purchasing of materials. And we know that if you look at the actual items challenged in both Massachusetts and other parts of the country, it's almost universally either books by, for, or about people of color, or books by, for, or about LGBTQ individuals. And so when we say free to all, our duty is to ensure that traditionally underrepresented voices, we have an extra duty to ensure that those representations happen in our collections, in our programs, in our staff. That is how we deliver on free to all, and that is why we continue to be committed to the real principles of equity, of diversity, and inclusion, and we will not back off those values. So thank you so much for joining us today for a quick set of highlighted tours through the state of the library, a little bit about the state of the world, and what we have ahead. We do know these are challenging times. We're very grateful for your attendance and for those of you who can, for your continued support in whatever way makes sense for you. Thank you. Please enjoy your library.